In this video, we delve into a rather unusual yet increasingly relevant topic, the conflict between homeowners and their homeowners association, HOA, regarding the right to grow tomatoes and other food in residential gardens. Many homeowners find themselves in a perplexing situation where the desire to cultivate their own food is met with strict HOA regulations that often prioritize aesthetics over sustainability. This conflict raises important questions about individual rights, community standards, and the growing movement towards self-sufficiency in food production. As more people become aware of the benefits of home gardening, the tension between personal freedom and community guidelines becomes more pronounced. In many neighborhoods, HOAs impose rules that dictate what can be planted, how yards should look, and even the types of structures that can be built. These regulations can sometimes extend to vegetable gardens, leaving residents feeling frustrated and powerless in their own backyards. However, amidst this struggle, a glimmer of hope emerges in the form of a legal loophole that has been discovered, which could potentially shift the landscape of community gardening rights. This loophole highlights the importance of understanding local laws and regulations, as well as the power of advocacy in challenging restrictive policies. By exploring this legal avenue, homeowners may find a way to assert their rights to grow food, thereby fostering a more sustainable and self-reliant community. This situation not only underscores the complexities of HOA governance, but also emphasizes the need for dialogue and compromise between residents and their associations. As we navigate this story, we will also showcase the resilience of individuals who refuse to back down in the face of adversity. Many homeowners have banded together, forming support networks and advocacy groups to challenge the status quo and push for changes that allow for more freedom in gardening practices. This grassroots movement exemplifies the power of community support in overcoming obstacles and achieving common goals. Through shared experiences and collective action, these residents are not only fighting for their right to grow food, but also fostering a sense of camaraderie and solidarity among neighbors. As we explore this journey, we will hear from those directly affected by these HOA restrictions, gaining insight into their motivations and the challenges they face. Their stories will illustrate the broader implications of this conflict, highlighting the importance of local food production and the role it plays in promoting sustainability and resilience within communities. Ultimately, this video aims to shed light on the ongoing struggle between individual rights and community regulations, encouraging viewers to consider the implications of such conflicts in their own neighborhoods. By raising awareness and fostering discussions around these issues, we hope to inspire others to advocate for their rights and explore innovative solutions that can benefit both homeowners and their communities. Join us as we navigate this compelling narrative of resilience, community support, and the quest for the right to grow food in the face of restrictive HOA regulations. Together, we can explore the possibilities that lie ahead for community gardening and the future of sustainable living. In the heart of a suburban neighborhood, the protagonist, Sarah, faced an unexpected turn of events that would ultimately lead to a confrontation with her homeowners association, HOA. After losing her job due to company downsizing, Sarah found herself grappling with financial uncertainty and a desire to regain some control over her life. In a bid to save money and ensure her family had access to fresh produce, she made the decision to start growing her own food. With limited space in her backyard, she creatively transformed her driveway into a makeshift garden, filling it with vibrant tomato plants, herbs, and other vegetables. This initiative not only provided her with a sense of purpose, but also became a source of nourishment for her family during a challenging time. As Sarah embarked on her gardening journey, she was pleasantly surprised by the support she received from her neighbors. Many of them admired her determination and even offered to lend a hand, sharing gardening tips and resources. This sense of community uplifted her spirits, reinforcing the idea that she was not alone in her struggles. However, it wasn't long before the harmony of her newfound gardening endeavor was disrupted. Patricia, a member of the HOA board and known for her strict adherence to community rules, began to take notice of Sarah's unconventional gardening setup. Initially, Patricia expressed her concerns in a casual manner, suggesting that Sarah might want to consider more aesthetically pleasing options for her driveway. But as the days went by, it became clear that Patricia's discontent was growing. The HOA had established a set of aesthetic standards designed to maintain the neighborhood's visual appeal, which included guidelines on landscaping, yard maintenance, and the types of structures allowed in front yards. These rules were intended to create a cohesive look throughout the community, but they often left little room for personal expression or individual needs. Sarah, who had hoped her gardening efforts would be seen as a positive contribution to the neighborhood, soon found herself at odds with these regulations. The The first sign of trouble came when Sarah received a violation notice from the HOA, citing her driveway garden as a breach of their aesthetic standards. The notice was formal and stern, outlining the specific guidelines she had allegedly violated and demanding that she remove the plants within a specified time frame. This unexpected communication left Sarah feeling disheartened and frustrated, as she had poured her heart into her garden, believing it to be a beneficial addition to the community. The violation notice not only threatened her gardening efforts, but also cast a shadow over the supportive relationships she had built with her neighbors. While some stood by her side, others began to express concern about the potential repercussions of defying the HOA. The situation quickly escalated, and Sarah found herself at a crossroads, torn between her desire to cultivate her garden and the pressure to conform to the HOA's standards. As she contemplated her next steps, the initial events leading to the HOA's intervention set the stage for a larger conflict, one that would challenge her resilience and ignite a conversation about community rights and the importance of growing food in a world increasingly focused on sustainability. As Sarah continued to nurture her driveway garden, the atmosphere in her neighborhood shifted dramatically. What began as a hopeful endeavor to grow her own food soon spiraled into a contentious battle with a homeowners association, HOA, and increasingly some of her neighbors. The HOA, initially appearing to be a passive observer, began to take a more aggressive stance against her gardening efforts. Formal letters started arriving in her mailbox, each one more stern than the last, outlining the supposed violations of the community's aesthetic standards. The letters were filled with legal jargon and threats of escalating fines if she did not comply with their demands to remove her plants. Each notice felt like a personal attack, undermining her sense of belonging in the community she had called home for years. The fines imposed by the HOA were not just financial burdens. They were symbolic of the growing hostility she faced. Each time she received a notice, the fines seemed to increase, creating a sense of urgency and pressure that weighed heavily on her. Sarah couldn't help but feel that the HOA was targeting her specifically, as if her garden had become a personal affront to their authority. This selective enforcement of rules became increasingly apparent as she observed her neighbors. While her garden was deemed a violation, other residents had similar setups, flower beds overflowing with colorful blooms, decorative statues, and even small fountains, none of which seemed to attract the same scrutiny. It was clear to Sarah that the HOA was not applying its rules uniformly, and this realization fueled her frustration and sense of injustice. Amidst this turmoil, Sarah found an unexpected ally in Mr. Garcia, an elderly neighbor who had lived in the community for decades. Known for his wisdom and keen observations about neighborhood dynamics, Mr. Garcia approached Sarah one afternoon while she was tending to her plants. He shared his insights about the HOA and the underlying tensions that often simmered beneath the surface of their seemingly idyllic community. "You see, Sarah," he began, "this neighborhood has always had its factions. Some people thrive on control, and they see your garden as a challenge to their authority." His words resonated with her, illuminating the complexities of the relationships within the community. Mr. Garcia explained that the HOA had a history of selectively enforcing rules, often targeting those who dared to step outside the established norms. He recounted instances where neighbors had faced similar hostility for minor infractions, while others were left unbothered. "It's not just about the rules. It's about power dynamics," he said, his voice steady. "Some people feel threatened by change, and they'll do whatever it takes to maintain the status quo." His perspective helped Sarah understand that her struggle was not just about her garden. It was emblematic of a larger conflict over individuality versus conformity within the neighborhood. As the hostility from the HOA and some neighbors intensified, Sarah felt a growing resolve to stand her ground. With Mr. Garcia's support and insights, she began to see her situation not merely as a personal battle, but as part of a broader conversation about community rights, sustainability, and the importance of nurturing one's own food. The increasing hostility only fueled her determination to advocate for her right to grow food, igniting a fire within her that she hadn't realized was there. Determined to fight back against the escalating hostility from the HOA, Sarah decided to take matters into her own hands. She began a thorough investigation into the laws and regulations governing her community, hoping to find a way to assert her rights and protect her driveway garden. Her first step was to delve into the HOA's governing documents, which included the community's bylaws and the covenants, conditions, and restrictions (CC and RS) that outlined the rules for homeowners. As she pored over these documents, she stumbled upon a crucial piece of information: the county's official definition of landscaping. This definition was surprisingly broad, encompassing not only ornamental plants but also edible vegetation. This revelation sparked a glimmer of hope in Sarah. If her garden could be classified as landscaping under the county's guidelines, it might provide her with a legal basis to challenge the HOA's claims. Encouraged by her findings, Sarah decided to document the violations of other neighbors in her community. Armed with her smartphone, she began taking photographs of various yards that clearly deviated from the HOA's aesthetic standards. She noted instances of overgrown lawns, unkempt flower beds, and even decorative items that were not in compliance with the HOA's rules. As she compiled this evidence, it became increasingly clear that the HOA was not enforcing its regulations uniformly. Some neighbors had been allowed to maintain their gardens and yards without consequence, while she faced relentless scrutiny for her efforts to grow food. This selective enforcement only fueled her determination to stand up for her rights and challenge the HOA's authority. Understanding the legal landscape surrounding HOA disputes became paramount for Sarah. She realized that knowledge was her greatest weapon in this battle. She began researching case studies and legal precedents involving similar conflicts between homeowners and their associations. Through her research, she discovered that many homeowners had successfully challenged HOA restrictions by citing local laws and advocating for their rights to grow food. This information was empowering. It reinforced her belief that she was not alone in her struggle and that there were pathways to victory. Sarah also reached out to local advocacy groups focused on homeowners' rights and sustainable gardening. These organizations provided her with valuable resources, including legal advice and strategies for navigating disputes with HOAs. They emphasize the importance of understanding one's legal rights, particularly in the context of community gardening. Armed with this knowledge, Sarah felt more confident in her ability to confront the HOA and advocate for her right to cultivate her garden. As she continued her research, Sarah began to draft a formal response to the HOA, outlining her findings and asserting her rights based on the county's definition of landscaping. She meticulously referenced the documentation of her neighbors' violations, demonstrating the inconsistency in the HOA's enforcement of its rules. This process not only solidified her resolve but also transformed her from a passive participant in the conflict into an empowered advocate for her rights and the rights of others in her community. Through her research and newfound understanding of the legal framework surrounding HOA regulations, Sarah was ready to take a stand. She recognized that this was not just a personal battle. It was a fight for the right to grow food, promote sustainability, and foster a sense of community in a world that often prioritizes conformity over individuality. With her documentation in hand and a clear understanding of her legal rights, Sarah prepared to confront the HOA, ready to advocate for herself and others who shared her vision of a more inclusive and sustainable neighborhood. One fateful evening, as Sarah was winding down after a long day of research and planning, she received an alert from her home security system. Intrigued, she opened the app on her phone to check the live feed from her driveway camera. What she saw sent a chill down her spine. The footage revealed Patricia's son, a teenager known for his rebellious streak, sneaking into her driveway under the cover of darkness. With a sense of dread, Sarah watched as he began to uproot her carefully tended tomato plants, laughing with a couple of friends who had accompanied him. The scene unfolded in a matter of minutes, but it felt like an eternity to Sarah as she witnessed the destruction of her hard work and passion. The next morning, Sarah was devastated to find her garden in disarray. The once vibrant plants lay scattered across the driveway, trampled and broken. Heartbroken, she knew she had to take action. With the security footage as evidence, she decided to report the incident to the police. When the officer arrived, Sarah felt a mix of hope and anxiety. She explained the situation, showing him the footage that clearly identified Patricia's son as the vandal. The officer listened attentively, taking notes and asking questions about the incident. However, after reviewing the evidence, he expressed his reluctance to pursue charges against the teenager. "He's just a kid," the officer said gently. "I understand this is frustrating, but it might be better to handle this within the community rather than escalate it further." While Sarah appreciated the officer's perspective, she couldn't shake the feeling of injustice. The vandalism was not just an attack on her garden. It felt like a personal affront to her efforts to create something meaningful in her life. The emotional impact of the incident weighed heavily on her. She had poured her heart and soul into that garden, using it as a source of healing and resilience after losing her job. Now, it felt as if all her hard work had been reduced to a cruel joke. The laughter of Patricia's son echoed in her mind, amplifying her sense of isolation and vulnerability. In the days that followed, Sarah struggled to process her emotions. The vandalism had not only destroyed her plans, but also shaken her sense of safety and belonging in her community. She felt a mix of anger and sadness, grappling with the realization that some neighbors were willing to go to such lengths to undermine her efforts. The support she had once felt from her community now seemed overshadowed by the hostility from Patricia and her family. Despite the emotional turmoil, Sarah found solace in the support of her friends and the advocacy groups she had connected with during her research. They rallied around her, offering encouragement and practical help to restore her garden. With their assistance, she began to replant her tomatoes and herbs, determined to rebuild what had been lost. The act of replanting became a therapeutic process, allowing her to channel her frustration into something positive. As she worked, Sarah reflected on the incident and the broader implications of the vandalism. It was a stark reminder of the challenges she faced in her fight for her rights and the importance of community support in overcoming adversity. While the vandalism had left its mark, it also ignited a renewed sense of purpose within her. She was determined not to let this setback define her journey. Instead, she would use it as fuel to advocate for her right to grow food and foster a sense of community in her neighborhood. In the wake of the vandalism incident, Sarah realized that she could no longer fight this battle alone. The emotional toll of the HOA's hostility and the recent attack on her garden had ignited a fire within her, compelling her to take action not just for herself but for her neighbors as well. Determined to rally support, she organized a gathering at her home, inviting neighbors to come together and share their experiences with the HOA. As the evening approached, she felt a mix of excitement and anxiety, hoping that others would be willing to join her cause. When the night arrived, Sarah was pleasantly surprised by the turnout. Neighbors she had only waved to in passing filled her living room, each bringing their own stories of frustration and grievances against the HOA. One neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, spoke about the fine she received for having a flower garden that the HOA deemed too wild. Another neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, shared his experience of being reprimanded for painting his front door a color that was deemed inappropriate by the association. As the stories flowed, it became clear that many residents felt similarly oppressed by the HOA's selective enforcement of rules. The atmosphere in the room shifted from one of individual frustration to a collective sense of solidarity. As the gathering progressed, Sarah encouraged everyone to voice their concerns and brainstorm ways to address the HOA's overreach. The idea of forming a united front began to take shape, with neighbors discussing the possibility of drafting a petition to challenge the HOA's selective enforcement. They recognized that they were stronger together, and the shared experiences of feeling targeted by the HOA created a bond among them. Sarah emphasized the importance of standing up for their rights, reminding everyone that they had the power to effect change if they worked collaboratively. The energy in the room was palpable as neighbors began to share ideas for how they could collectively confront the HOA. They discussed organizing a community meeting to address their grievances directly with the HOA board, as well as the potential for creating a neighborhood association that could advocate for their rights. The thought of having a unified voice resonated deeply with everyone present, and the sense of community solidarity grew stronger with each passing moment. As the meeting came to a close, Sarah felt a renewed sense of hope. The gathering had not only provided a platform for neighbors to express their frustrations, but it also ignited a movement within the community. They were no longer isolated individuals facing the HOA's scrutiny. They were a collective force ready to challenge the status quo. The importance of community solidarity became clear to everyone in the room, as they recognized that their shared experiences could lead to meaningful change. In the days that followed, the momentum continued to build. Neighbors began to connect with one another more frequently, sharing updates and strategizing on how to approach the HOA. Sarah took the lead in drafting the petition, incorporating the various grievances shared during the gathering. With each signature collected, the sense of empowerment grew, reinforcing the idea that they could stand up against the HOA's arbitrary enforcement of rules. As they prepared to present their united front to the HOA, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude for her neighbors. The support and solidarity they had cultivated transformed her initial struggle into a community-wide movement. Together, they were ready to confront the HOA, armed with their collective voices and a determination to advocate for their rights. The journey ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but with the strength of their community behind her, Sarah felt more confident than ever in their ability to effect change and reclaim their right to grow food and express their individuality in their own homes. As the momentum of community support grew, Sarah found herself at a crossroads. The gathering of neighbors had ignited a sense of empowerment, but she knew that confronting the HOA would require more than just a united front. it would necessitate a solid legal foundation. With this in mind, she decided to consult with a property rights lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. After researching local attorneys, she scheduled an appointment with a lawyer known for his advocacy in homeowners' rights and community gardening issues. During the consultation, Sarah laid out her situation, detailing the harassment she had faced from the HOA, the vandalism of her garden, and the collective grievances of her neighbors. The lawyer listened intently, taking notes and asking probing questions. He explained the complexities of HOA regulations and the legal avenues available to her. As they discussed her case, he introduced her to the Agricultural Heritage Protection Act, a piece of legislation designed to promote and protect agricultural practices, including community gardening. This discovery was a game-changer for Sarah. The act provided a legal framework that could potentially shield her gardening efforts from the HOA's restrictive rules. It emphasized the importance of local food production and the preservation of agricultural heritage, aligning perfectly with Sarah's mission to grow her own food and advocate for sustainable practices in her community. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Sarah felt a surge of determination. The lawyer explained that the Agricultural Heritage Protection Act could serve as a powerful tool in her fight against the HOA. However, he also cautioned her about the urgency of the situation. Given the HOA's history of selective enforcement and the recent vandalism incident, he recommended filing an emergency injunction to prevent the HOA from taking further action against her garden while the legal process unfolded. This injunction would temporarily halt any fines or penalties imposed by the HOA, allowing Sarah to continue her gardening efforts without fear of retribution. The urgency of filing the injunction weighed heavily on Sarah. She understood that time was of the essence, especially with the HOA's aggressive tactics. The thought of losing her garden again, or facing additional fines, was unbearable. With the lawyer's guidance, she began to gather the necessary documentation, including the security footage of the vandalism, the violation notices from the HOA, and the support letters from her neighbors. Each piece of evidence reinforced her resolve to take a stand. As she worked on the paperwork, Sarah felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. The prospect of legal action was daunting, but it also represented a significant step toward reclaiming her rights and advocating for her community. She knew that this was not just about her garden. It was about challenging the oppressive practices of the HOA and standing up for the rights of all homeowners who felt marginalized. With the lawyer's assistance, Sarah filed the emergency injunction, and the anticipation of the upcoming hearing loomed large. She felt a sense of empowerment, knowing that she was taking a proactive approach to protect her garden and her community. The support of her neighbors, combined with the legal backing of the Agricultural Heritage Protection Act, fueled her determination to fight back against the HOA's overreach. As the days passed, Sarah prepared for the hearing, rallying her neighbors to join her in solidarity. They were ready to stand together, not just for her garden, but for the right to cultivate their own spaces and express their individuality in a community that had, until now, stifled their voices. The journey ahead would be challenging, but Sarah was resolute in her belief that they could make a difference, not only for themselves but for future generations of gardeners in their neighborhood. The day of the hearing arrived, and Sarah felt a whirlwind of emotions as she entered the courtroom. The atmosphere was thick with tension, a palpable mix of anxiety and anticipation. Her neighbors filled the benches, their faces a blend of support and concern, while representatives from the HOA sat across the room, their demeanor stern and unyielding. Sarah took a deep breath, reminding herself of the importance of this moment, not just for her, but for everyone in the community who had felt the weight of the HOA's oppressive rules. As the proceedings began, the judge entered the room and a hush fell over the crowd. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a reputation for fairness, took her seat and surveyed the room. Sarah could feel her heart racing as the lawyer for the HOA stood to present their case. He argued that the HOA was simply enforcing its established guidelines and maintaining the aesthetic integrity of the community. He painted Sarah's garden as an eyesore, claiming it detracted from the neighborhood's visual appeal. Sarah clenched her fists, knowing that the HOA's selective enforcement had targeted her unfairly, while other yards with similar or greater deviations had gone unchallenged. When it was Sarah's turn to speak, she stood before the judge, her voice steady despite the nerves coursing through her. She presented her evidence, including the security footage of the vandalism, the violation notices, and the letters of support from her neighbors. She passionately articulated her case, emphasizing the importance of community gardening and the Agricultural Heritage Protection Act. As she spoke, she could see the judge's expression shift, her interest piqued by the compelling arguments and the clear support from the community. After both sides had presented their cases, The judge took a moment to deliberate. The courtroom was silent, the tension almost unbearable as everyone awaited her ruling. Finally, the judge returned to the bench, her expression serious yet thoughtful. She began by addressing the HOA's actions, noting the inconsistencies in their enforcement of rules and the lack of clear justification for targeting Sarah's garden. It is evident, she stated, that the HOA has not applied its regulations uniformly, which raises significant concerns about fairness and equity within the community. The judge then turned her attention to the Agricultural Heritage Protection Act, acknowledging its relevance in promoting local food production and community gardening. She emphasized that the right to grow food should not be stifled by arbitrary regulations, especially when such practices contribute to the well-being of the community. The judge's findings were clear. The HOA's actions were not only unjust but also counterproductive to the values of sustainability and community support. When the judge announced her ruling, a wave of relief washed over Sarah and her neighbors. The court granted the emergency injunction, effectively halting any further action from the HOA against Sarah's garden while the case was further examined. The ruling was a significant victory, not just for Sarah but for the entire community. It validated their collective struggle against the HOA's overreach and set a precedent for future disputes. As the courtroom erupted in quiet murmurs of disbelief and joy, Sarah felt tears of gratitude welling in her eyes. The ruling represented more than just a legal victory. It symbolized the power of community solidarity and the importance of standing up for one's rights. With the judge's support, Sarah knew they had taken a crucial step toward reclaiming their voices and advocating for a more inclusive and sustainable neighborhood. The journey was far from over, but this ruling ignited a renewed sense of hope and determination among the residents, uniting them in their shared vision for a community where everyone could thrive. In the aftermath of the court ruling, the atmosphere in Sarah's neighborhood shifted dramatically. The judge's decision to grant the emergency injunction not only protected her garden, but also sparked a wave of change throughout the community. Almost immediately, the HOA was compelled to remove the spike strips they had installed to deter residents from using their driveways for gardening. The removal of these barriers was met with cheers from Sarah's neighbors, who had long felt stifled by the HOA's restrictive measures. It was a symbolic victory, representing the community's newfound resolve to reclaim their rights and foster a more inclusive environment. To celebrate this significant win, Sarah and her neighbors organized a community gathering in the local park. The event was filled with laughter, food, and a palpable sense of camaraderie. Families brought dishes to share, and children played games while adults exchanged stories of their experiences with the HOA. The atmosphere was electric, as the community came together not just to celebrate Sarah's victory, but to acknowledge the power of collective action. As the sun set, Sarah stood before her neighbors, her heart swelling with gratitude. "This is just the beginning," she declared, her voice filled with conviction. "Together, we can create a community that values our rights and supports our passions." Inspired by the momentum of their victory, the residents began discussing the establishment of a community garden project. The idea was met with enthusiasm, as many neighbors expressed their desire to cultivate their own plots and share in the joys of gardening. Sarah took the lead in organizing the initiative, rallying volunteers to help identify a suitable location and develop a plan for the garden. With the support of local gardening experts and community organizations, they secured a plot of land that had previously been neglected. The transformation of this space into a vibrant community garden became a symbol of resilience and unity. As the garden project took shape, the positive ripple effects of standing up against the HOA became increasingly evident. Neighbors who had once felt isolated began to connect with one another, sharing gardening tips, resources, and even produce. The garden became a hub of activity, fostering friendships and collaboration among residents. Workshops on sustainable gardening practices were organized, allowing community members to learn from one another and deepen their connection to the land. The garden not only provided fresh fruits and vegetables, but also served as a space for community gatherings, potlucks, and educational events. Moreover, the success of the community garden inspired other neighborhoods to consider similar initiatives. Sarah and her neighbors became advocates for community gardening, sharing their story with local media and encouraging others to stand up against restrictive HOA regulations. The movement began to gain traction, with more residents across the region advocating for their rights to grow food and cultivate their own spaces. As the months passed, the community garden flourished, becoming a testament to the power of resilience and solidarity. Sarah often reflected on how far they had come since the initial conflict with the HOA. The garden was not just a place to grow food. It was a symbol of their collective strength and determination to create a community that valued individual expression and sustainability. The journey had transformed not only Sarah's life but also the lives of her neighbors, fostering a sense of belonging and purpose that would resonate for generations to come. The victory against the HOA had sparked a movement, and the community was now thriving, united in their commitment to nurturing both their gardens and their relationships with one another. As we wrap up this video, it's essential to reflect on the key takeaways from Sarah's inspiring journey and the broader implications for all homeowners facing similar challenges with their homeowners associations, HOAs. One of the most critical lessons is the importance of knowing your rights in HOA disputes. Understanding the governing documents, local laws, and regulations can empower you to stand up against unjust practices. Sarah's experience illustrates that when individuals are informed and united, they can challenge the status quo and advocate for their rights effectively. Whether it's through legal action or community organizing, knowledge is a powerful tool in navigating the complexities of HOA governance. Additionally, we encourage you to support community gardening initiatives in your area. These projects not only promote sustainability and self-sufficiency, but also foster a sense of community and connection among neighbors. Community gardens can serve as vital spaces for education, collaboration, and the sharing of resources, helping to strengthen the bonds within neighborhoods. If you're passionate about gardening or simply want to contribute to a greener future, consider getting involved in local gardening efforts or even starting your own initiative. Every small action can lead to significant change, and together, we can cultivate a more inclusive and supportive environment for everyone. We hope that Sarah's story has inspired you to reflect on your own community and the potential for positive change. If you face similar challenges or have thoughts on how to advocate for your rights, we'd love to hear from you. Please share your experiences in the comments section below. Engaging in dialogue not only helps build a supportive community, but also allows others to learn from your insights and experiences. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll stay updated on future videos that explore important topics related to homeowners' rights, community gardening, and sustainable living. Don't forget to hit the like button if you found this video helpful or inspiring. Your support helps us reach more viewers and spread awareness about these crucial issues. Lastly, consider sharing this video with friends, family, or anyone who might benefit from the information presented. Whether they're dealing with HOA disputes or simply interested in community gardening, your share could make a difference in someone's life. Together, we can create a ripple effect of knowledge and empowerment, encouraging others to stand up for their rights and embrace the joys of gardening. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. Remember, you have the power to make a difference in your community, and by standing together, we can cultivate a brighter, more sustainable future for all. We look forward to seeing you in our next video, where we'll continue to explore topics that matter to you and your community. Until then, keep advocating for your rights, supporting local initiatives, and nurturing the connections that make your neighborhood a better place to live.